So everything that I just talked about in that first session is basically in the first 2 chapters of the book, so you don't need to read those. You can just like skip it and move on. But I want to talk to you now about some stuff that's not in the book and just kind of have like a pastor to pastor conversation about some of the things that we've learned down the road here. I think there's a couple thousand churches around the country that have run a version of our script with their church. The vast majority of those churches have just done a really good sermon series. They read our book and like, this sounds great. Also, these guys give away the sermons and they're just online, and so I can do a great 3-week sermon series, and hopefully some of our people will throw block parties. And then we check in with them a year later and we say, hey, how's it going? Or, what do you see any big differences or any fruit out of this? And they really end up saying, no, not really. Or they say, that was a great sermon series. And then there's about 15-20% of the churches that we check back in with a year later and they go, something is like drastically different in the DNA of our church. And they have story after story after story about people that are engaging with their literal neighbors that have ended up coming and being an integral part of their church body, literal neighbors that have been saved from addiction, marriages that have been restored. And so we started to ask this question, like, what do those churches have in common? The churches that do this well, what are they doing that we can begin to share with others who really have a desire to do this? So there's 3 big things that the churches that do this well have in common. The first is this: the primary communicator actually does it in their own lives. Period. It doesn't mean the lead pastor or the primary teaching pastor has to be the best neighbor on their block. It does mean that they need to be making some small steps in a direction of rediscovering a theology of place, of getting to know some of their literal neighbors. So if that happens, then all of a sudden those like stories that we jam into sermons that like don't belong in sermons, that ain't fit, man, it's a good thing when those are neighboring stories. It does a lot for the DNA of the church if you want it to be a neighboring church. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this: they're good storytellers. And when I say they're good storytellers, it doesn't mean necessarily that they have a person like Jonathan on their staff who does a killer video with like the right music and at the right time that you get done. It's really inspiring. Those are great. But one of the things that we've learned about stories is that our people, anytime you're talking to your people and you put something really concrete in front of them and ask them to do it, they will look for almost any way possible to kind of abdicate their calling back to you. They're thinking things like, I don't know, man, you're a pastor. You get paid to like hang out in Starbucks and like read Strength Finders books. And you have time to do this neighboring stuff, but I don't. Okay? Or you put like the best looking couple in your church up on the screen in a story and get the music just right and then turn it down, right? And then all of a sudden people go, they're like extroverts and everybody wants to, they're like really cool. I can't do that, right? And then they're out. You ever have those stories, you put somebody on your stage and they're just really bad. Like you're out there and you're listening to them tell their story and you're like, please God, help them get through this. One of the things that we found is those are sometimes the most powerful stories because they're taking away every obstacle that people want to throw up for why they can't do it as well. And so I'm not saying that like you should go and like kill a whole service just to do that, but I am saying it's like you should actually think about the power of having people who don't have it all together share. And what if your real goal is to help people to cross the bridge over to engaging other people and to do what you're talking about doing, that maybe it's not like the best story is going to be the best tool to make that happen. And that's been something that we've just seen over and over again with the neighboring thing. So, one of the big temptations, so if you have a primary communicator that does this well in their own life, it's really tempting for you just to share stories of people on staff. I think it's important for people to share stories naturally in the course, especially if you're on staff, but really try to find people who are your people that are just out there in your congregation and who are being unleashed in their neighborhood, and they're finding joy and life in doing this, and tell their stories. I think you'll see a lot of fruit come out of that. And then the third thing that churches do well is that they keep saying this one thing over and over again. They say, what you do in your front yard counts. It's real ministry. And they say things like, hey, listen, what you do with your literal neighbors is just like serving in our children's ministry. It's just like being on our elder board. It's just like being a greeter. It counts. And if you say that over and over again, two things are going to happen. For about 10% of your people, you're going to validate a whole way that they've already been living. You'll see them light up. They'll just go, oh my goodness, I've been doing ministry this whole time. And you're just going to give them a lot of energy and wind in their sails to keep going. And the rest of your people, it's a thought that's going to haunt some of them. It's going to haunt them when they're sitting in their living room with their laptop open and trying to get caught up on work on their inbox, and they look outside their window and they see people out there. And they have this chance to go, you know what, I could actually close this right now and walk out the front door. It's going to haunt them when they drive in their neighborhood and out of their neighborhood. You're going to start giving them vision that something really sacred is happening right around them and has been happening right around them. And so the more that you can just say this, what we do in our front yard counts. It's real ministry. We have one of the most successful church plants in the last 20 years in Denver is actually down in Castle Rock. Somebody who was mentioning Castle Rock, they have just done this from the ground up. And granted, I know it's a lot easier to put things into the DNA of the church plant than it is of an existing church. But one of the things they've done is they've just said this. They said, listen, if you're going to be a part of our church, you're going to be one of the best neighbors on your block, period. And if you say that enough, it becomes the self-fulfilling prophecy. It's not true when you first start talking about it. There's a city in Modesto that I've done a lot of work with, and they, every one of their cop cars say, Modesto, a city of great neighbors. It's not true right now, okay? But it's got a lot better odds of becoming true because everywhere you go, you keep reading it and seeing it. And there's something about us being able to share vision in that way. And so when you just keep talking about something and keep putting it out there in front of your people, you can really move them, especially if it's something that's really, really attainable.